is talking with the Lord. It's from Genesis 18, 9-15. "Where is your wife Sarah?" they asked him. "There in the tent," he said. Then one of them said, "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son." Now Sarah was listening at the entrance to the tent, which was behind him. Abraham and Sarah were already very old, and Sarah was past the age of childbearing. So Sarah laughed to herself as she thought, "After I am worn out and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure?" Then the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Will I really have a child now that I am old?' Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son." Sarah was afraid, so she lied and said, "I did not laugh." But he said, "Yes, you did laugh." My topic for this sermon is Sarah's encounter with God. Most of you would probably consider this as Abraham's encounter with God, but I would like to look at it from Sarah's point of view. This is Sarah's perspective. She's an old woman who hears God tell her husband, Abraham, that she'll have a baby. She doesn't believe it because she's very old and way past the age where she could have a child, so she laughs. The Lord tells Abraham that Sarah laughed, but she lies because she's afraid. I mean, wouldn't we all be afraid if we were confronted with our sin? But God obviously knows the truth because he's omniscient. But this is God's perspective. He sees that Abraham has been faithful. He wants to bless Abraham with a son. He knows that they will have a son because he knows everything, past, present, and future. Sarah, however, doubts that he has the ability to give her a son because she's very old. He knows that he is not restrained by any human limits. He is all-powerful and all-knowing. He knows that she doubts, but he doesn't change his promise. Instead, he fulfills it. In this story, the Lord has chosen to bless Abraham and Sarah with a son despite their age. This shows God's amazing generosity, especially after Sarah laughs at the promise. This story also shows God's omniscience and omnipotence. He is all-knowing and all-powerful, and he is not constrained by any human limits. But I want to focus on God's faithfulness in this situation. He did fulfill his promise to Abraham and Sarah, despite the fact that Sarah had laughed and lied to him. It says in Genesis 21, 1-5, "Now the Lord was gracious to Sarah, as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the very time God had promised him. Abraham gave the name Isaac to the son Sarah bore him. When his son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him, just as he had been commanded." The Lord fulfilled his promise at the exact time he said he would. The Lord gave Abraham a son when he was 100 years old. He will be faithful to us as well. If we trust his promises, he will be faithful to us every time, without fail. He's not limited by anything at all. I personally feel like Sarah sometimes. I doubt whether God can fulfill his promises to me. But this story is reassuring because God forgave her and fulfilled his promise, just as he continues to fulfill his promises to us every day. Luke 23:24 says, Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they are doing." This is when Jesus was on a cross, being beaten and mocked, and he asked forgiveness for the people who were mocking him and beating him and killing him. He will forgive us as well. There are countless more forgiveness stories in the Bible, and even more in the world we live in now. You are forgiven. You just have to accept it. God knows every deep, dark secret about us, yet he never gives up on us. He always continues to fulfill his promises to us, and no matter what we do, he is always ready to forgive us. So I ask you, are you like Sarah? Do you ever doubt that God can fulfill his promises to you? Do you ever get afraid when God confronts you about your sin? I do. But look at this story. God forgave Sarah, and he has already forgiven you. He knows everything, and he still comes back to us every time.